Thanks everybody for joining in on episode 4 of the Education Adda series. Welcome all. We will continue on from the previous 3 sessions. We discussed the role of motivation in the learning process in the first Adda. We then moved on to the role that choice plays in education outcomes. And then we discussed opportunities and conversations around learning outside the classroom, and we focused on children in grades 6 through 10 last week. And today we are going to discuss the younger age group of children in grades 1 to 6. Today, most of the panelists you already know, so even though some of you are new to this particular Adda, we encourage you to go to our website and look up the profiles of our panelists. Radha, Soumya, and Vishnu have been there in previous episodes. Today we have a special guest. He's also a Gen Wise mentor. He takes a session on parenting teenagers. This is Dr. Bhushan Shukla. Dr. Shukla, welcome. Dr. Shukla is a child and adolescent psychiatrist based out of Pune. He's also a parenting coach. He's had a very long resume. I'd encourage all of you to go to our website and take a look at his background. Without further ado, today I'm going to hand over the stage to Radha. Radha, could you please kick it off and just take this forward? We should complete the initial context conversations in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we can have discussions and comments and questions from all of you that have signed up today. Thank you. Over to you, Radha.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh, and good morning, people. It's quite wonderful to be back. It almost feels like we formed a little community of ourselves here, and I think that's really nice. Last week we were talking about, the older children and some of the learning challenges or sort of issues around learning at an older age outside of the curriculum. So Soumya, I thought since we're going to be talking about the younger kids today, a lot of what gets manifested or what happens or the challenges that we seem to see at an older age has a lot of its beginnings at a younger age, right? The things that we do, things we don't do,
sure.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so given your experience with Montessori and as well as being a parent, would be great if you could share your thoughts on learning outside the curriculum at a younger age. And then we'll go to Dr. Shukla after that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Radha. Morning, people. Nice to see a happy crowd of parents here on this Saturday morning. I know life seems terribly busy, and so while we don't know where time is sort of going, it seems to keep us fully occupied. So I appreciate your taking the time to join us here. Okay, Radha. So learning at younger ages. Yeah, this is actually something quite, I would say it's like not too many people realize this aspect, which is not so nice for the children. Okay, so this age, let me just take it as say 6 to 10, 6 to 12, supposing we think of it as age 6 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the age, for example, in Montessori, that she calls the age in which children are sort of sensitive to learning what she calls culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a sensitive period for culture. The term sensitive period is used in a slightly different context for the younger children, but it is used in an equally strong, if slightly different context here for these children. And so the idea is they are in a sensitive period for culture. So culture is not quite what we think of as culture, but is everything that is a product of the human mind is culture. So all studying, all academic disciplines, all explorations, all discoveries, all inventions, all pushing of boundaries, all philosophies, all of that is a product of human mind, is an endeavor of the human urge to push. That is one thing to remember. The other thing is that this is the age for intellectual exploration. So this child is willing to run with you in his mind, in his imagination, everywhere. He will go to the farthest galaxy and he will go to the deepest oceans with you. wondering about things. So it's a lovely age to expose them to everything that we think of as learning. And this is the age in which a child is able to comfortably connect to an adult who is not his parent, for a length of time, for a few hours, over a certain transaction, over a certain learning, over a certain workflow. And this is why this age, the beginning of 6 or 7 years of age, is when across all cultures traditionally schooling begins, because this is when an adult can reach the intellect of the child. Before that, you really cannot get children to do things by asking them and talking to them and convincing them and using logic. But now you have a child who is open to reason, and that really opens up all of what we think of as learning and books and knowledge and the thrill of knowing what's out there. And this is the age for that. Now, before I go a little more into this this wonderful sort of feeling of thinking about the age, I want to say one thing is that this window closes. At about 12, 13, the window shuts. So there is a certain opening and there is a certain closing for this sensitive period, for this awareness and for this spotlight that shines in the child's view of the world on this. So it's up to us to sort of grab that window and run with it. So what does that mean? That means this child needs a lot of introduction to everything that is out there. In fact, Montessori says, offer this child the universe. That's the bound, which is basically boundless, that of what you can offer to this child. So this child needs, for example, very large umbrella stories that weave things together with the power of the imagination. And then he needs small little dots here and there. So he will need large stories about, for example, the weather patterns, very high level. And then he will need small things about evaporation and condensation and that sort of thing. So the child can connect the dots and come up with his own view of those larger stories and build these stories, which then form again dots for further stories and further stories. So, for example, in the Montessori view of this child, some of the first lessons that are offered to this child are story of coming of the earth, coming of life, coming of humans, the story of writing, the story of numbers. So this is where you start at a very high level of what it has meant for us to know the world and to create things and to have what she calls a supra world on top of the world that has come, the supra nature that we have created of things that would not have existed without the human presence. So that's what this is. And so this is the age, for example, to introduce all what we think of as knowledge of astronomy, of geology, of chemistry, of botany. And botany and zoology can really fly at this age, because more so than, for example, physics, which is a little bit even more abstract, botany and zoology are live around you. And so much can happen with that. And mathematics in Montessori, for example, is offered so much with concrete material, and children just go for it. So, for example, I'll just say this: I was working with this, not really working, but sort of working with this 10-year-old, and we were talking of the of numbers that can be thought of as being in other base. So we're talking of base 4. Numbers in base 4. So we talked of 1 and 4 and 16 and 64 and writing numbers in that and what does it mean and how you can only have 0, 1, 2, 3 symbols in that. And we went through all that and all that. Okay, so then we came to this point of introducing the equivalent of a decimal in that system. So then I introduced, he was not very comfortable with the idea of decimals itself, not familiar. So I introduced the notion of a decimal and he got it quite quickly. Of a decimal point and everything. So then we went on. So I said, look, just like in our decimal system, we have this a decimal point. We will have a decimal point, a corresponding point in this base 4 system. So I said, so what do you think we should call it? So this child says, I said, it's called decimal because deci is 10, no? So we call it decimal. So he said, oh, then we should call it quadrimal. So I said, yeah, quadrimal is nice, so let's call it quadrimal point. He said, no, Soumya, not quadrimal point, but a quadrimal square.
Oh, interesting.
Tell me how much this child has been affected, has really taken this in to come up with quadrimal square, so this is what you want to do to the child. You want to fire something inside him so it touches him in a very deep way. And then really the pace at which they run and they fly, the adults can hardly keep up with it. That is where you want the child to land. That is where you want to sort of get him into. And it's possible. This is a child who's going to a regular mainstream school. The bright kid is interested. He has his regular homework and his complaints and his media and all like nothing. Nothing on the out. He's not an outlier. None of the not that at all. So it's possible.
Yes.
But the interesting,
it's very encouraging, in that sense, it's very, very encouraging that you don't have to be in what is so-called an alternative school or whatever.
Exactly.
So at this point, Soumya, I was wondering that, you've sort of, when you talk about botany zoology, I was thinking that's been my experience with children as well.
Sure.
Particularly, it's exciting. It's a very, so at this point, I was wondering if Bhushan, if we could bring Bhushan in to sort of take us from this really, sort of energized and active and vibrant and both for the adult and the child, as a learner and as an educator or as a parent, sort of moving there. If we could bring in Bhushan and to sort of, you were not there in the last few sessions, but given your vast experience, given your experience working with teenagers, etc., this seems like a nice springboard point to sort of take off. And although we're talking about younger children today, I think just for the benefit of all of us on the, present here today, it would be great if you could draw from your experience, in a sense, cutting across both age groups, I think, given that we didn't have the benefit of your company last time, I think it would be wonderful if you could share just your experiences in this whole learning process and cutting across age groups as well. Yes, please, Bhushan,
So, see, what I have seen with the clinical population that I see and the schools that I work with is that children are constantly looking at things around them and making their own mental models about understanding things as well. And I entirely agree with Soumya that there are windows of opportunity and they close. That is something that a lot of parents somehow don't realize. The way it is about height, the way it is about certain muscle structures or flexibility, it is same about your brain mechanisms as well. That once the window of opportunity closes, it is very difficult to actually start learning organically once again. And then you have automatons, then you have people who actually struggle to learn anything new unless it is presented in that specific format that they are used to in the school. And that is a huge loss. I see that kind of rigidity even when they come for counseling and therapy as well. Because counseling or therapy process is about exploring, it's about learning, it is about learning of new ways of looking at the same data, learning to process it in different way, coming up with different conclusions, making your own experiments, trying them out, seeing what fits you, what doesn't fit you. So it is at emotional and behavioral level, but it is learning nevertheless, which is, the fundamental thing about counseling anyway. It's relearning of experience. And people who are, I know this has become a very cliched term and used again and again, but let me use that again, is who are damaged by formal industrial level education. The way you have factory farming, you have factory education as well. They find it very difficult to learn even their emotional patterns or relearn their patterns. So I think there is a huge amount of wisdom in what Soumya just said, that it is important to create that environment of learning, to have that wonder where, oh my God, where did this come from? This is something which is what keeps us going. And keeping that curiosity alive is absolutely essential. And once you see that there is little less curiosity in the child, your work to help the child becomes incrementally more difficult.
No, absolutely. And also the sense of wonder that both of you have spoken about is this constant questioning and this, there seems to be this, it's almost like often as an adult, there are two ways, right? One is you get into that state of wonder with the child and then it's a learning process for you. But at another level, sometimes very challenging because there is a certain kind of energy that is required of the adult as well to sort of, as I think one of you put it, keep pace with that running that the child is doing. And Bhushan, the other thing also was, we were talking a lot about older kids last time, and both of you have spoken about this window shutting, right? So if you, from your experience, if you can sort of share with us a little bit more about, this period of window shutting and this sense of being aware about it, and how do you see the, I mean, it's also about seeing signs, right? I mean, in children, in both in discovering their potential and also in seeing if they have some challenges that they're trying to deal with, right? I mean, how would you sort of say, how does that go into the learning process from a parent's point of view?
So one point there clearly, that the way we know about neurological development, we have some very clear shutting points for early childhood. When we are talking about this emotional learning, I don't think there is a very clear shutting down point. That is why most of us are able to learn at a later date also.
Thank God.
Clear indicator, a more clear indicator is what is the level of anxiety in the child that system has generated. And if the anxiety starts becoming a dominant force for the child, then I think the window has shut. Because there are just 2 or 3 ways in which you can really tackle anxiety. Either you can take it on and fight it, which is what we are looking at as a learning process, or you can simply freeze in face of that challenge, or you can take the avoidance route and actually move out of the way of that challenge.
Right.
And when you see that freeze or flight mechanism to learning is becoming more prominent, or is becoming a default mechanism, then I think you are looking at that window closing very rapidly. So I think that can happen for some people even at 8 years, and for some people that may not happen till they are 40. So that is a difficult one to predict, but by adolescence you are quite clear what is happening there.
I think at this point, Rajesh, I was thinking this is a very good point for us to open it up for all the folks who are on the call, to sort of pose questions to both Soumya and Bhushan. I think this would be a very good point to do that, because I'm sure everybody's got loads of questions, and and there is a lot of experience here. So I think
sharing perspectives as well.
Yeah, I think this would be great.
We do have one question from on the chat window, but if anybody would like to just share your introductory perspectives and experiences, I just invite you to do that now. Okay, while you're thinking about it, Bhushan, here's one question for you. Could you please explain a little bit more about, you spoke about creating an environment before the window shuts. Could you just speak a little bit more, explain more about how does one go about creating this environment? And what is this environment?
Bhushan, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Bhushan.
That's an excellent question, and I'm glad that it has come up right in the beginning, because we all know that creativity needs to be facilitated. We all agree that creativity is really the crux of being what we are, and unless you have that in abundance, it is difficult to be happy. I'm not deliberately not using the word survive, because pretty much everybody survives, really, not in the way that their parents want, but they survive anyway. So let's not put survival there, but let's talk about thriving and being happy. And again, I will restrict myself to the formal school environment. We also agree that there is certain serious negative effect that school environment and curriculum creates for children. So creativity has to be created in a separate space. Children need to have a dedicated space where they can explore their curiosity. So, and how do we do that? If you have to use a medical example there again, if you cannot kill a bug, can we at least put a fence around that bug? Can you make sure that the bug does not generalize? For example, now we hear a lot of stuff about BCG vaccine. You know how it came about? It did not come to protect you entirely from TB. BCG actually does not prevent TB. What BCG does is, when it is given in very early childhood, and in India it is given at birth, it prevents certain fulminating versions of TB. TB, like TB meningitis, where the child ends up being extremely damaged or even paralytic or mentally retarded. So those things go away. You modify the immune response in such a way that terrible form of the illness does not appear, but a milder, manageable form can still be facilitated. I think that is what we need to do with formal education as well. That if we let it run amok, it will destroy the child's mind. And there is no way of avoiding it. Every child, whatever we speak on a small group, for millions of children, there is no alternative to formal education. So let us try and put a boundary around that formal education. Let us not let formal education expand itself and occupy our entire being. So other than the school and a dedicated 1 hour for homework, let us not indulge in formal education anymore. Adding tuition classes, adding 3 and 4 hours of homework and all of that is definitely harmful. So parents will have to do that actively. This also comes with a very specific cost. Creativity, we all know, requires a separate budget, right? And it is not just time budget, it is financial budget as well. Because parents need to give time, and parents' time invariably is taken out of their money earning activities.
That's right.
So actually working at 80% of your capacity is something that parents will seriously need to think about. If you talk about, the way the old Prestige ad ran that agar aap apni bibi se karte ho pyar to kaise kare inkar. So if you really love your children and if you care about their good upbringing, then you cannot love your earnings so much. It is the unfortunate truth, and I have followed that in my life. As a doctor, it was possible for me that I can choose to let my patients go away and earn a little bit less. I don't know if that is possible for somebody who is actually in a salaried job. But then making clear boundaries around the job so that you are not carrying the job home and giving that much time to child. Because children's exploration also needs some kind of adult help. As we have seen that it is a guided discovery. Sometimes a child needs to be present to make sure that child sticks with that job and is not driven away by something else. And we need to be there. We need to be available for that. So unless the parents put in their time and most importantly attention to the child, this is not going to happen. So that is the first ingredient of creativity. And I think once you are that committed, then really the world is your oyster. There are thousands of things that you can do and let the child explore things.
I think Kranti, you have something to ask? Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to ask this to Bhushan sir. I am very much convinced that yes, psychology is something very important to be understood, especially when you are working with children and all. But then, how should school inculcate it in their way of functioning with children? Like, how should they have understanding of psychology? Because I've seen there are some restrictions. It is the personal factor is so much into it. For my child, if the teacher is giving any comments, it varies or it depends on her feedback also. So it becomes very person specific. I don't want it to become person specific, but more of understanding psychology and implementing it in the school formats. That is what I am looking forward to understand.
That's a very difficult one to answer, but I'll never make an attempt because I'm product of Indian education system, and I'm told that even if you don't know answer of that question, you must still think and answer something about it. Okay, so I'll make an attempt. I work with a lot of schools, and what I have found with teachers is that, and I would hate to be a teacher in Indian school because they are probably the most enslaved lot that there is. They have a huge responsibility for curriculum and managing their classroom. When we actually sat down and saw how many hours they actually get to teach, and if you divide that from a class of 30 or 40, how many minutes are available for children, you kind of get 30 minutes per student for entire math curriculum in a year. It is something as crazy as that. So I honestly would not put this additional burden on teachers to be psychologically minded as well. I think it's unfair because as it is, they are so badly tied up in all the expectations. What I have also seen in schools is that when there are parent-teacher meeting days, and now every school wants to have that every month, which I think is a total nonsense. Parents shouldn't be visiting schools unless they are called. Teachers actually fall sick. There is maximum amount of absenteeism on that particular day. It is stressful for children. So I'm very much against putting additional burden on children. Let us see if we can do the curriculum or the school work in such a way that they actually have less time. Because what I have realized is that if the teacher is less stressed out in the classroom, they automatically become more tuned to the child's psychological needs. So generating more free time for teachers, reducing their actual work will actually automatically make them more child-minded. See, we are looking at people who have chosen this profession because they like it.
Right.
You know, this is one of the least paying professions in India for an educated person. And still you have people doing that for 20 years, 30 years. It is not just for salary.
Right.
Those who are really in it for money, leave it within first 5 years and start their own tuitions.
Right.
Or who feel seriously constrained. So these are good teachers. Let's give them more freedom instead of more burden.
I think Parvati,
do you have a follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Do you have a follow-up comment on that? Or?
I want to say something. Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just reframe the question. I do understand the formal part and all. I very much agree with you, Bhushan, sir. See, I want to make it a little more specific. I run a school. It's a preschool, a Montessori school. And I have ample of time. I'm not here for the salary and all. So I have ample of time to be spent for understanding the psychology. My number of students are less. On a very the specific question I'm trying to make over here is that as someone who is running a school, a Montessori school, for a preschool, I want to understand how should I contribute in more of the psychological manner. See, herein I'm not giving much of the importance to what the skill set the child is learning and all. Yes, it is important, definitely important. But I give little more importance to understanding the mindset and helping the child to grow psychologically fit. So with that regards, I wanted to understand what more better I can do as a person who runs the school. I work directly with children. Yes.
So this is very much within my curriculum. So I think I should attempt to answer that more honestly. See, the thing is that, again, this may sound slightly counterintuitive, but individual child psychology, as it is put out there in therapies and all of that, is not really relevant when you are dealing with them in a group. This is a very different environment where children are quite enthusiastic, and the age group that you are talking about, they have they come there very happily. They like that socialization, they like that environment. And if you are working in a Montessori environment, I think that is one of the best things that can happen to the child anyway. So tailoring that even further to an individual child's personality, I think would actually do a disservice to the child. We have an entire generation of adolescents on our hand who, I can't think of a better or a less harsh word, are actually entitled. Okay. And I don't think entitlement is something that school system should be fostering there. Their learning style is something entirely different. But feeling right that all the environment should mold in a way that it accommodates my needs is a sense of entitlement, is what I would say. That if you're already giving open enough environment, then it should not be personalized beyond that point. The personalization can happen in the time taken by the child to learn a certain skill. A personalization can happen in the way the child wants to explore it and learn it. Personalization can happen in what other peripheral things that the child wants to include in learning that particular thing. But personalization cannot happen at a personality level. Because personality, normal personality, will have a very, very wide range and they can accommodate all of these things. And that is important. It is a bit like building your natural immunity. You know, you cannot have genome specific children put together who have similar immunity levels. We actually enhance each other's immunity level. And same view needs to be taken about personality as well. So when we talk about personality, it becomes very individualized only when it goes to the extremes of pathology. For a normal person, we all have fairly similar variations of personality, which are very, very broad. So I wouldn't talk about catering any kind of educational effort to the personality part of the child.
Rajesh, I think Parvati had a question, no?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Here's the question, Doctor. I'm so glad and relieved that the window of those sensitive periods, the shut window, can be reopened. Can you throw some more light on it, please? How does one reopen that window that seems shut?
Bhushan, you're mute.
I lost audio for a moment in between. Can you please repeat that question?
You had mentioned that there is a sensitive period which opens and closes, right? And you had also mentioned that it is possible to reopen the closure sometimes. And I think the question is, can you throw some light on how does one go about doing that?
Right. So the closure of the window or restriction of the window happens because of anxiety, is what I said. So at any situation that creates a reduction of that anxiety for you, will unleash your creativity. Let me give you an example of an Indian student who has been through typical schooling and graduate engineering examination, but is lucky enough to get in a US university where, say for his PhD or something like that, and has 5 or 6 years in front of him, which are not directly tied to his bread and butter. Some amount of money is guaranteed. There is no direct parental pressure. 12 hours of time lag actually makes sure that people don't talk to you all the time, and you actually get freedom. And the American awareness, again, I know I'm generalizing this a little bit, and there is difference between departments and professors, but where you are allowed to take 6 months or even 1 year, even to decide your research question. You know, this kind of freedom, when people have that available, it makes a lot of difference. And that can open that window again for them. It can again make them a child and start exploring. For example, when I did my MD in psychiatry, I entered Department of Psychiatry when I was 23 years old. And my guide actually gave me 9 months to decide on my MD thesis.
Wow.
Out of 3 years, I was given 9 months. Typically, like, you know, how I got so much time to sharpen my axe before I was given the job of chopping down the wood. She gave me multiple small projects to try out on my own before I could even decide. And this is something that reduces anxiety in the whole process. So yes, if adults are given that kind of freedom, they can flourish again. Most of them still have that seed saved somewhere, not entirely damaged by the forest fire of education. So it is possible.
Wow. That's nice.
Nice imagery.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts and observations, comments? Sindhu, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I don't have a question yet. I'm still mulling over some of the stuff that's been spoken about today.
Thanks, Sindhu. Thank you. If there's any other comments and thoughts?
Yeah, what I would like to maybe ask Dr. Bhushan, if there are no questions from the others. Yeah, so this is nice actually to look at it this way, that, you know, especially one has experienced it, so one has a sense of what this means, that when you're in a system that sort of supports you and encourages you to open up and think, it you know, something inside the, you know, inside sort of germinates again, which is a nice way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with a question from the audience. I can talk to you later also. It says, yeah, go ahead. Rajesh, I will leave it to you at this point.
So here's the question. You spoke about anxiety. How do we avoid anxiety and stay creative lifelong?
That's a $1 million question, and I think we all try to answer that all the time in our life.
That's right.
But there are definitely a few things that one can do about anxiety. And again, I think there are no uniform answers. what I have seen so far is people do various things to manage their anxiety. First is the level of awareness, challenging one's own decision-making processes as adults and asking what is my driving force here. If I see myself being very protective or being very avoidant, then obviously I'm using mechanisms to deal with that anxiety which are malfunctioning. Then can I create that? Exactly how do I think these anxious thoughts? How does it come to me? How does it affect me? Many people are not aware of their anxiety. Again, if I have to use an imagery, imagine you have a magnet in your pocket that you don't know about, and then you are using a compass in your hand to find direction. That magnet is going to tilt it, and you will actually reach somewhere without ever finding that spot on the map. You think you are following it, but you are not really following it because you are not aware of that magnet. So if you realize that your direction finding mechanism it's tricky, it's stressful, it doesn't match with the map that you have in your mind in hand, then probably it is your anxiety which is keeping you away. So becoming aware. One of the beautiful things about anxiety or any negative emotion is that as soon as you become aware of that negative emotion, it starts diminishing. So that awareness is the first part. And then there are various things that one can do about and again, I don't know if this is a textbook answer, but a lot of people try actually unleashing their creativity by learning to play music, learning a new skill, learning to work with their own hands, which is strangely very liberating. People can try those things out. There are people who actually put out creative time at specific time of the day. They fence it so that it is not disturbed by anything else. That can be managed. For people who are given into giving very quick reactions, even practice of meditation techniques like Vipassana can help to a great degree, where you actually deliberately disengage. So, you press the proverbial clutch and you disengage the wheel from the engine in some way, so that both can run their own course and you can simply observe there. These things can help adults as well as older children.
Great, thanks, Doc. There's just one more question. We'll probably keep this as the last question unless something else comes up quickly. How do we, as teachers, create a balance between what the system requires us to do and what we need to do as teachers to nurture talent that we see? You're on mute again, Doc.
Yeah. Once again, my answer is going to be slightly theoretical because I have never been a teacher teaching a class of 30 children with a specific curriculum in my hand. My experience of teaching is with postgraduate residents or psychology students who come specifically with the aim of learning, so who are self-selected population. Okay. But what I have seen good teachers doing in classrooms is something that I can share with you. And most of them use curriculum as a very broad guide. That is one thing. Another good quality that I have seen in teachers is a healthy shamelessness. That they are pretty much impervious to the criticism coming or pressure coming from management and the parents to take a specific course. They introduce the topic, they let children explore that topic. Their classes look a little bit chaotic and they are absolutely happy. They take that as a badge of honor that my class is not sitting very quietly. That means I have people who are still alive in this classroom. They let children speak. They encourage children who have understood the topic to actually explain it to other children. They facilitate peer learning in their classrooms. They make pairs of children. They help them learn together or teach each other. So teacher who actually takes a backstage and let children run the show for certain periods, certain topics in certain tasks, end up actually helping the children a lot.
Yeah. In fact, Bhushan, that was, I couldn't agree with you. It's like 1000% in agreement with you completely. The important thing there, I think, is one is the thick skin and the shamelessness. And the second thing is taking the back seat, even physically. In a classroom, when you physically move to the back of the class and let the children get onto the board and, explain to each other, that even small things like that, seemingly small things like that, create a huge difference in how children begin to express themselves, even the shy ones. Yeah.
Even the class control that most teachers have at the foremost of their mind. As long as you are restricting yourself to that 6x4 podium put right at the head of the class, you are actually encouraging the backbenchers to disappear from the scene.
Exactly.
A teacher, you know, the entire classroom is teacher's territory, and like a tiger or a lion, they need to claim their territory. They need to walk between the rows. They need to stand at the back. They need to rearrange children's notebooks. They need to claim their territory. And a confident teacher invariably generates good learners there. You know, a teacher who does not want students to, you know, what they say in Marathi, hatachi ghadi ani pondavar boat kind of stuff. So that actually generates a lot of energy in the class, which can be put to good use. Typically, backbenchers, who I know that they can be very destructive, but these are children with huge amount of energy. And a lot of work on them can galvanize the whole class in doing the task. So teacher must move around and stand at the back of the class and let the children take lead at least once in every classroom.
Very true. Yeah, very true.
Thank you, Radha. Thanks, Doc. We have a couple of minutes more. Vishnu, would you just like to spend a minute or two discussing some thoughts you have on the next set of sessions?
Yeah, I just have 3 short announcements to make. And by the way, Doc Bhushan, the teacher who asked this question, has all the qualities you mentioned. So I just wanted to
very much a
put that
favorite
out.
line, yes.
Yeah. So she does claim her territory in a very positive way. So the last few announcements. So one is Dr. Bhushan conducted a course called Parenting Teenagers Through the Storm, something like that, which was very popular and useful. And he's going to do one more session again on the 6th of July. And Soumya had done a session on using Montessori principles at home for parenting. So that was done for kids of the older ages, like I think 12 and above. Now she's doing a version for younger kids, 2 to 6 year olds, that is starting on July 20th. I've shared a link in the chat window. So if you click on that, you could share with you or your friends. That is one announcement. The second announcement is about the topics for the Addas in July, which I'm sharing on chat again, and we will send you WhatsApp messages and so on. So all these sessions are at 11:30 a.m. on a Saturday. That seems to be a nice time to take a break from our other regular stuff. So on the 4th of July, we have Radha talking about breaking silos in learning, the importance of interdisciplinarity learning across subjects. I'm naming the main speaker. There will be other people on the panel, but I'm just naming the main speaker. Saturday, July 11th, Naveen Kabra will be talking about why liberal arts may be a good choice for many students after 12th, especially those who are not very sure what they want to do. That's an important question, and Radha will also join him in that.
It's very interesting that Naveen is a top-notch computer scientist.
Yeah, and he's suggesting liberal arts, right? And there's a lot of research which says how delaying early specialization may be helpful unless you are really, really sure you want to do that. Then we have on the 18th of July, Dr. Bhushan again. I am sure if you attended today's thing, you will be back for this. Right, it's about a very important topic, building emotional strength. A lot of negative emotions, children are going through it. I'm shocked to hear the number of very sad instances happening among teenagers ending their life, and for educators and parents, this is a very heartbreaking situation. So Dr. Bhushan will help us to get some idea of early warning signs, and I mean, maybe not the extreme thing I just spoke about, but even just the smaller anxieties, right? And Radha will be, of course, Radha has been there in every Adda, but she will again, because she's used a lot of experiential learning, both at Rishi Valley and at Genwise, APU, and all her other teaching assignments she takes up. So she will be doing that. So that's the calendar for July. Also, do send us a message on what might interest you, what kind of topics you would like to have. The last announcement is, so we meet once a week, and sometimes we are busy at this time, but we also have a closed Facebook group. And even if you don't like Facebook, you aren't on it, there are people like Soumya who never do a Facebook post, but they are part of this closed Facebook group where we discuss only things related to, and Radha, same goes for Radha, we only discuss issues related to learning, talent development, children. All of us are in that group, so you're welcome to join that group. I've shared all of this in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yes, Doc, you were going to say something? Okay, great. Thank you,
Just
everybody.
thanks
We're
a
out
lot.
of time now. See you next week. Thanks for your thoughts, perspectives, comments, and questions. Doc, thank you very much. Radha, Soumya, and Vishnu as well.
Thank
Bye
you,
now.
people.
Thanks all of you. Thanks all of you,
Thank
and
you.
see you.
Thank
See you
you.
soon. Bye-bye. Yeah. Bye-bye.